Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Sunil. A lot of questions there, which were very good. And quite frankly, um, when we had the poll come up, I didn't answer it because I thought it was going to be quite difficult. So well done, all of you who've been able to keep up with it and actually post some of the good questions. Looking in the Q&A, Lisa, I'd just like to say that I won't answer your question right now about the key changes because we are going to talk about it now. So Lisa, if we don't answer it, if you could just retype your question at the end and we'll go through it again, if that's all right. Okay, so I think the first slide that we'll be looking at might be for Sunil if you could take us through this, please, Sunil, for the first two or three.
Yeah, sure. The assessments for the partners involved in it is a well-known process, but the approach that we use and the way that we provide this is through a three-stage process. The basis of how we operate is it's not a self-assessment. We do audit, we do review organisations' performance. So it's about lifting under the skin or under the bonnet and making sure that what an organisation says they do, they are actually providing and delivering. So a desktop assessment is reviewing from a public perspective, and that's very much around the communication and the engagement that's taking place to external stakeholders. And then a couple of elements in the more detailed review. So we have an in-person audit, which is then to go through the internal process systems, the reporting that takes place, and what that means for an organisation. So understanding about how that information gets used as well. And then also looking at the additional evidence that's available. So additional documents and reporting that might take place. And again, we review that over a period of a few weeks just to make sure that what an organisation does, we're able to account for that into the final score. So the final scores that comes out is then a good indication of where an organisation is and how it's implementing those ESG criteria within its business. And key part of that is those behaviours then do align with the forward requirements of the likes of ISSB, ESRS as well. In terms of the offerings, this is broadly the same as last year in terms of the offerings that we have. So the SME programme, which I've mentioned about, the online tool, which we're developing, and then the standard and the premium, which is around the audits, the feedback as well, and the provision of advice and guidance to be able to move on as well. So both of those two included. The difference between the two then is the number of hours around the audit interviews and the support that we're able to provide. Again, we've got different specialisms within the SFMI team and individuals that come from a TCFD background and a climate risk background, as well as Brenda, who comes from a procurement and finance related background. And then the premium will come with an improvement plan as well, which talks around what to do into the future and the progression that can take place for an organisation. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
you. So one of the things that Sunil hasn't mentioned that you hopefully will get to know is that in this process, we look at the desktop, we look at the in-person, and just to let you know, there's usually at least 5 people on our side who are making independent decisions at each stage of this process as we go through. So each of us has some specialties and each of us has an overview, and we look through all those things in detail, and then we come up with what I think are pretty robust conclusions. So that's the assessment process. One of the other things that we do is we look at the criteria as we go along. We take on board all of your feedback that we can at the time. And every year we reassess what we're looking at in detail, as well as in the larger categories and the larger things that are moving around in the world. So regulatory is, of course, one of the big hotspots. What we're going to discuss now is mainly some of these smaller changes that we're looking at in some of these details. So in the 3 categories, E, S, and G, we'd like to start with the environment, and we have about 5 of the environment criteria that we're looking at making these changes on this year. So in the first one, when we're looking at energy, we're looking at this as energy management. If you read some of these details here, it's talking about the modifications during changing occupancy over the year. So this for us, the main change is about the focus on the occupancy, but it's about making this fit for the needs. So whether it's COVID, whether it's a modern pandemic, whether it's various other changes that have happened over the recent years, it's about knowing how to work things in the low occupancy as well as the hybrid occupancy. So we'll be looking to adjust some of these changes on this one, mainly about the usage, but really seeing that people are bringing this forward into their everyday practices and moving it forward. On the water, now the water is something that's really interesting. It has been pulled out, as you know, for its own category here. It's not inside ecology or something. One of the big changes on this one is about the communication with the non-regulatory bodies. And this can be customer, can be supplier, communities, which is something that not all of us are doing yet, the local councils themselves, or any other sort of authorities that there may be. We also want to make sure that this is going to be aligning with risk management. Now, we know that water, as we've said with this first sentence here about the risk increasing due to drier summers, we know that portions of the UK are already in water deficit areas. And this is something that we see, it may change from time to time, but we are seeing those drier summers increasing. So not only do we want it to be really involving more of the local communities, but the need to really get hold of this is increasing every year we do this. So for the third one on this page out of our 5, we'll look at ecology and biodiversity. So we've called it both things in some of the communications that you may have seen or in our conversations. And we want to highlight here that this change is ecology and biodiversity. Everyone now is looking at biodiversity. You're going to be looking at the TCFD becoming the TNFD in the future. And we don't want to let go of the good things that are in the ecology. So for the time being, we're making sure that we focus on both sides of this and being able to start articulating more about the biodiversity. So this is still going to end up being a place where we talk about how the systems link, the humans and nature, and how they're getting addressed. It's also a good place where we can address air pollution, its impact on humans, on other bits of nature as well, and also water quality. So remember, for water quality, it's the quality, but also, for example, the temperature of the water. If people turn to nuclear, we're going to have some bigger changes of things, the desalination, etc. So the ecology and biodiversity, we're really making a stand here to make sure that each aspect within these are covered. And so for the time being, we'd like to change this heading to include both, even though it may be quite long. Do we have any particular questions on these 3 that we're discussing? No? Okay. So the next 2 that we would be looking at inside the environment are circular and transport. And these are quite interesting and can also be very challenging. So for the circular, I think everybody is starting to do some things in circular, and we want to challenge everyone in the FM industry to start stretching themselves, to start looking even further. So we've already got innovative ways people are talking about of letting go of goods that they don't want. And we want to start looking at more complete and more embedded ways to deal with unwanted goods, but also goods while we're using them. So we're going to be looking at handling goods so that they have a further life, that they can retain values of the assets, not just the goods, but the buildings as well. Looking at things for the longer life might include really looking at the life cycle assessment of things and bringing it back into the circular bit everywhere, from speccing what we want, from the procurement into the use, the education of staff to know, and then that final disposition at the other end, which hopefully won't always show up in our waste, but will show up in something else which may have a positive social impact, but certainly will help minimize the impact on the planet that we have. And for transport, this is also one, remember, I've spoken a few times about air quality. And this is an aspect that it's been really challenging for a lot of organizations, certainly not just the facilities management people, to really get a handle on the air quality and what they can do about that. So this is only one of the things that we're going to be bringing in here. And, you know, again, we're open to comments and suggestions on this one. So we've talked about, for example, avoiding congestion areas, avoiding congestion zone. Now, it's easy to say it simply displaces it, but we'd like to bring up the fact that the intensity of air quality in any tiny location, even if the rest of your area is clean, can actually start to trigger health problems. It exacerbates interactions with other substances that are already there in the air. We'd also, in this particular change, we want to bring in this link about transport, air quality, one aspect of it, with a potential link to social value. So we may be seeing examples about offering rides to charities, about piggybacking or sharing delivery of certain goods, about the return journeys and how they start to get used differently. So this is going to be broadening what a lot of you are already doing in your moves away from internal combustion engines, and in some of the innovative ways that you've already started talking about how you're adjusting your transport, your deliveries, your schedules, the territories that people are using. So I think those are the 5 that we're talking about for environment. Do we have any particular comments or questions now on that? Okay, great. So for society, we're only looking right now at 4. And again, we're open to suggestions if you have them. So these are the 4 that we would like to consider some changes on. One is in health and safety. We just want to be able to articulate a few things on this one. And this is the mental health being included in health and safety, not simply in well-being, and other aspects of well-being being considered in health and safety as well. So for this one, we know that some of you have already started increasing awareness about sleep and its effect on your well-being, and some of you are bringing it into health and safety. I think that's a good thing, and we'd like to see some more innovative things like that. We know that mental health as well is being handled increasingly in a well-being aspect, but we just want to bring in that the mental health and a state of an individual can also be considered in the health and safety realm as well. So these are things we'd like to bring in. Again, open to suggestions if people have any on how this is handled here. For the employment, most of this is about seeing progress in the facilities management level. We know that there are groups, and we know that there are some organizations there who are more focused, but this is about trying to make sure that there is some facilities management level and your area level data on this, as well as targets, as well as particular programs on this one. And also just a reminder here where we'll be articulating that it's best practice to have some targets, that are being measured, and if possible, to disclose that progress and changes in targets somewhere, if not public, then at least when you're being audited, that there's a place where that's being held by the organization and can be used for further improvements. Okay, so stakeholder engagement. We're suggesting we make a few, basically they're tweaks here, and it's just to bring out some specifics here. So we'd like to clarify that the stakeholders do need to be addressed. So what we're suggesting here is actually specifying stakeholders. In the past, we kind of looked at all, and now we want to think about that where your internal fits, how much you're engaging with your customers and supply chain, and of course that community, that public sector, that third sector with all the charities and all the other works that people are doing. The others are that we want to have that clarification on whether it's the corporate in the group or whether it's your FM that's doing it. And then for the 5th level, it's we'd like to re-emphasize to know the identity of the stakeholders, that you have the right stakeholders that you're engaging with, that their needs are reviewed and reviewed regularly, and just the simple identity of the stakeholders themselves, that there's a regular process where you make sure that you've got the right stakeholders in conversation with yourselves. So we will be looking for more of those things in there. So well-being, we would look to be very similar to the stakeholders, just being able to articulate with different groups where certain things are. So we've talked about already the employees and the long-term contractors. That's a good item of progress. We would also want to articulate about the customers and the tenants, what you're doing with them and the levels of that you're doing that. And also remembering this community that we're talking about. So remember, this expansion with the communities, which you're seeing in some of these details, is part of maturity of an organization and also society, because it's reflecting social impact and its rise that we're seeing in discussions in the future. So all of the things that we do in horizon scanning is showing that this social impact in these communities are coming back into the conversations that may have been dropped from 5 years ago. So governments, due diligence systems, human rights are all coming back into this. So we're articulating it in the stakeholder engagement as well as the well-being to make sure that we're including communities in these. So these are the 4 on society. Any particular comments and questions for now? Okay. So for governance, we do have 6 total that we're looking at making some changes and some tweaks on. And again, please do start thinking of some thoughts you may have on this. So for risk management in general, I'm pretty happy to see so many of us in this conversation today taking risk management so seriously. So for me, it's something it's kind of close to my heart, but it's a great place to start. And from that, a lot of improvements in an organization can really disperse. So for this one, clearly, given the importance we're placing on the regulatory and the standards today, we want to articulate a bit more in this space. So TCFD is going to be expected, as you can imagine. We'd also like to see an articulation down to the FM level of some of these risk management activities, not simply up at group, but closer to home and in the FM level on this one. Progress on the risks being integrated all the way down to contract level. We don't always see that, and it's a way of really getting a handle. And from that risk management at the contract level, it then becomes easier to see what can be done to improve a number of different things. And also how they're going to be managed, not simply that they show on a risk register somewhere, but how they're being managed and how they can start to impact the organization as we go. Also, for level 5, we've hinted at this before, but it's just a re-articulation of the idea that we want to see how these things can start to change the organizational behavior, regardless of where that locus of control might be for changing that organizational behavior. We would like to see that people are already looking at that, at where that mechanism is, and start to give examples of how some of these things can start to change the organizational behavior. So for board commitment, it's a similar sort of thing. We want to understand, Sunil has alluded to this as well, the competencies at the top level of the board and senior management. So not just one on the board, not just one senior manager, but we would really be looking at this spreading across real demonstrations that they have this, but also enough of them to reach the goal of having a quorum of informed decision makers. So there's not simply one on the board, but the actual quorum number on the board, they're all actually competent and can show competencies in the sustainability which we're looking at. And also the idea that the board and senior management actually do request information and get the right information and ensure that they actually do scrutinize not only that it can show on an agenda item, but that they're genuinely engaged with those conversations. So disclosure, the main thing in disclosure pretty much boils down to what's being done at the FM level, whether it's in the group or not in the group. And again, we can be open to some of these discussions on what might come through from that one. And finally, for compliance, finally on this slide, I should say, finally for compliance, it's just asking again to make sure that the new legislation, we've talked about the horizon scanning, identifying how it's going to be implemented, when it's going to be implemented. This includes this ISSB that we've talked about and the TCFD, which a number of you have already seen that we're mentioning in other criterias. And those are the ones we're talking about now, but we know that that's going to be including more and more. And we would just like to be reassured that our partners have that whole process under control as to the identification, how it's going to be handled, and really embedding that into the organization's changes. So for these four in governance, any particular comments right now? Okay, so I think we have the final two on governance. And these are the diversity and inclusion and the collaboration. So for diversity and inclusion, it's the reassurance that it is a strategic topic in the company, that it's not simply an add-on to an annual report and someone totally separate is dealing with it, and it really doesn't come back into the mainstream. So it's things that we've already talked about with a few of you, is the objectives themselves should be articulated. We would want them to start looking towards being public targets, and not only public targets, but then of course measured and then improved upon as well. We also want to articulate here that about more engagement with the supply chain. And this is something that a number of you do well and very well. And we'd like to see not only more of us doing that, but that particular conversation with the supply chain has KPIs that can be improved on. A conversation is more of an engagement with a partner and as collaborator, rather than simply dictating things in some of our scorecards or some of our terms. And those things that are being done are very important to get this embedded. But we really want to start looking more about having that being a positive and that social impact. So all the way through in this diversity inclusion down into supply chain. And finally, for collaboration, this is a little bit of an expansion in the breadth and in the depth of the collaborations and some of the partnerships. So we're looking to be able to hear that you can articulate what the collaboration is, the benefits, measures that you may have in this one, enough of the results and understanding that further collaborations can be built upon what you've learned from this particular one. And these collaborations, remember, can also include competitors and peers. They can include industry bodies and also the customers. So if there's no other comments on this particular part, great. So we can move straight on to the consultation period. Sunil, do you want to take us through this, or would you like me to?
I think we can probably both do it.
Okay.
But I'll lead on that. But just close out the 2023 criteria change. So we'll send out a documents with all of the changes on there. So and then we're available. So if you've got any questions or feedback on that, then please do share it with us over the next week or so. And then we'll have the final criteria, which will be done for later on in May. Okay. So for the 2024 programme, so a lot of this comes in line with what we've been talking around the ESRS, the ISSB, and the changes which that's going to have on the landscape of the reporting. A massive positive in terms of consolidation of the requirements, but inherently the SFMI provides an enabling role in terms of the underlying behaviours that goes to contribute to compliance against those two standards. Together with that, we've also got TCFD, transition plans, which also start to come through. And so within that, we're seeing a need for a change for the SFMI. So it's going to be the first major change that we've done for over 5 years, and looking at how to incorporate these elements within the criteria itself. So what we're not suggesting is that it's a blank sheet exercise and we'll start again, but it's really what's the best way of being able to incorporate this in, but also what do we look at in terms of leadership. So going back to that potential role that FM has of being a restorative business, how do we set that out as a new bar for the industry to be able to try and achieve and attain as well. So the program that we're really looking at doing is about having engagement from the partners, but also from the institutes, IWFM, RICS, ICS and IEMA as well, and also other bodies as well, to come and feed into that review exercise. And really the gatepost that we've got is kicking that off from today and then moving our way forward so that we've got the ability of being able to utilise that criteria in 2024. And I think similar to what happened when we developed the SFMI itself, 2024 there'll be lots of learnings that will come out of that exercise as well that will help to improve the criteria and the reporting that will then move into the 2025. So this is where we start to look at it as being an implementation in 24, learnings coming out from that, and then embedding that in further into following years. Yeah. Brenda, do you want to run through the details?
So for the, do you mean the timelines, Sunil?
Yeah.
So these are proposed timelines, and we're hoping that they're going to work with everyone. If they're not, please do let us know. So what we're looking at is, from this consultation, is really working together as partners, looking at developing some of the working groups. So we'll be able to start to narrow down some of the topics and some of the things that need to be done, looking at working groups now and into early summer. So hopefully in June we'll have those ready. You'll get the current criteria at the end of May, but in June we're hoping that they're going to be up and running and everyone's consulting each other on this one. Each of them looking for changes and collating information through the summer. And we understand that summer is summer, so we're looking at late autumn for these sorts of things, but we would be hoping September, October, we would be looking at some of the criteria themselves, which all of you have had input into and started to talk about the challenges and how they can be addressed. We would then be looking again at further consultation on the revised criteria, and that would be early spring. So it's likely to be personal contact and phone calls, as Sunil might have done, emails, which some of you may have had with myself and other members of the team, and giving us feedback in various forms on this one. And then the release of that new criteria, again, similar to today, but in that May of 2024. So it's a big piece of work, and it's going to best work with every person being involved in giving us what's going to work for yourselves, how we can get there as well. So please start thinking about some of the topics that you may have if we haven't thought of them, and which of these things you might like to really jump into and help drive. But everyone will have the opportunity to comment on each of the topics in each of the discussion groups.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks very much, Brenda. Are there any other questions that we've got? So we've got still got a little bit of time left. Are there any other questions that have come out from the whole morning's discussion?
We have 2 questions in the Q&A, Sunil, which I can start to answer, and one of them I think you might have to jump in as well. So firstly, yes, Lisa, I do think that TOMS, so the question is about society and employment using the TOMS, the national TOMS. If you remember, the Welsh government has used them quite well, and they've really become quite a good standard for, being used across the industry. Would we like to use them this year? So the Tom's Light, you might want to look a bit further into this one. And I would say one of the great things about something like the Tom's is that it gives some very specific measures. It will tell you how much a particular activity that you've done might be worth in terms of monetary value. So that is a good thing, but things that we are going to be looking at is not simply the monetary value, but the actual social impact. And this can be even more challenging. So you might want to, everyone might want to consider challenging themselves. In addition to using a standard like the Tom's, you might want to have one or two that you start with where you start to measure the impact on the target group, where you measure the impact on the local area. And we do have a partner who is pretty good about measuring the local area and the local impact. So we know it can be done, it's just challenging. So that for me would be the thing, is it's great to definitely use some kind of a standard, but to also start looking at the impact on the people themselves, not simply how that works out from that one. And I see that Heather, I think you would like to also join in.
No, sorry, no.
All right, sorry about that. So hopefully that's going to answer some questions. And again, feel free to send us emails. And in fact, that might be a good topic for us to take into our consultation for next year, is exactly what we do on those standards, those measurements. And then, you know, do we just look at the monetary value? Do we look at impacts and how that can be done? So that might be something that becomes a bit of a working group. For the indoor air quality, we have a question about indoor air quality. Is that going to become a factor too? In my view, Greg, in my view, absolutely yes. And it's something that my colleagues are probably tired of hearing me talk about the phrase air quality. But I do think that it's going to be an important aspect. So it's come onto the radar for a lot of people because we had COVID, because we had lockdown, for a number of different things. People were starting to look at indoor air quality even more than they already had been. HEPA filters, how many changes of air per hour. And that I think is definitely something that's going to be on the rise, and it is going to start showing up, I think, in the health and safety, well-being, of course, but it'll probably come through in the health and safety. I don't know that it's going to come through immediately yet. And, you know, probably my colleagues will know more about this and about how quickly it's going to come in than I do.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I'd agree with Brenda. I think it's been on the cards for a while. I don't think there's anyone out there who's complaining about the air quality improvements areas which have been set up by the Mayor of London over the last few years, and the improvements in breathing around those areas. Challenges around indoor air quality is just about understanding what causes poor air quality, but we've got things like well standards and some of the other well-being criteria which is helping us. So I think that's helping us to build knowledge of why we've got poor indoor air quality. We've got solutions around it, so that's helping us lead towards improving on those areas. Again, it's something that we can start to look at in more detail as part of the new criteria and making sure it's positioned correctly in there. Yeah. We've got a question from Cam around, can we explore financial resilience as it has a direct relationship with emotional and physical well-being? Again, yes. This again leads on as part of that the social well-being elements, but also roles that organisations have as part of that as well. So I think that's certainly an area that we do need to be investigating further as part of the 2024 criteria, and starting to explore how that fits in as part of the overall criteria. Brenda?
Yeah, I hadn't expected this question about financial resilience, but having seen it, I'm actually quite glad to see it. Financial resilience is something, I mean, everyone knows this perfect storm of COVID and cost of living and everything, which has really surprised a lot of people. And I'm absolute kudos and praise to our organizations who have turned around and started acting quickly to try to help their people as quickly as possible. So we haven't necessarily seen all the measures being permanent, but we have seen people giving cost of living pay rises, a boost for a certain time period, a one-off or a monthly boost over, say, 6 months. We've seen loans being helped facilitate some help of facilitation with the company themselves. What we haven't seen are some other things which could happen, like the syndicated purchase, helping people get renewables at home, possibly, helping people switch into things which are both sustainable and cheaper. And this financial resilience is going to be a very interesting one, because people's quick answer will be, oh, just pay everyone more. And that's not always the answer. And we know that some of our partners have really started that financial education as part of that support and that well-being. So I do think that this might be, again, a potential for a topic in one of our working groups and consultation to see if something more needs to be done on that one and how it does start to fit into this. So if you could send an email, please, about the financial resilience, just to make sure that we haven't forgotten about it.
Yeah, fantastic. We've got a question from Uma around ventilation systems don't eliminate viruses. I'm not a virologist, so I couldn't answer that question. However, on the call we do have Greg, who might be able to answer the question, because he's got a much better understanding of this. But it's probably one that we'll come back to you on, Uma, around the ventilation systems and viruses, and yeah, how that system works.
So if Greg doesn't want to say anything quite yet, I'll run rabbit on this one and put out the opposite view of saying, if we filter well, that it can help do it. So that's given us sort of the counterpoint for that discussion to be taken forward on that one. So yes, Greg, you can go right ahead if you want to do it now, or we can have discussions later.
Okay. Are there any other questions coming through? So I think that's all of them that we've answered. So just running through what's going to be happening from now. So we'll send out the criteria to the partners for review, and we'll close those out over the next few weeks. The assessments themselves will follow a similar timeline. So during August, you'll receive your internal reports that talks about from the desktop perspective and desktop study, and then we'll start to plan ahead for the September and October audits. The awards will be again towards the end of November, the last week of November, that the awards will be held, and then the feedback presentations will be happening during December and January as well. During that time frame, there'll be an overlap with the consultation exercise that's going to be taking place as well. The other key program that we have is the Scope 3 research work, which we're undertaking. That's also again pressing ahead, so we will be coming towards position by June and July time, where we'll be releasing the second phase of that. So phase 2 of the standards and guidance will be released, and again we'll be looking for feedback and engagement from the FM community with those 2 documents. And then we'll be commencing phase 3. So phase 3 is looking at having somewhere in the region of 150 to 200 projects that we want to bring in. And that's really to start to get the data and the information that allows us to have FM specific emissions factors, which we can then start to use and have, again, much better credibility on the data which is being put forward and the calculations which have been put forward, and to also then start to use that information for inclusion within design construction. So it's whole life building impacts and implications, but then also to start to have some conversations within government as well as part of the carbon monitoring and disclosures for property services as well. So that's the overall program. If you want to get involved in the Scope 3 work, please let me know. We're starting to have conversations on them from middle of May onwards, and to get further engagement on that side of things. And if you want to have further information about the SFMI, please contact any of us here, either myself, Heather, or Brenda, and we'll be happy to help. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll give you back 5 minutes of your day. Have a lovely rest of your day, and speak to you all soon. Many thanks. Bye.